got new members. We're delighted to have them, all here. I will say that we'll do formal introductions at the 10 o'clock meeting. I hope that's okay with everybody, but that's on that agenda. This morning is the work session. As I think all of you know, we are compressing essentially 2 days into one. And so we're going to try to move forward, somewhat expeditiously with things. The only item for the work session is the discussion of, House Bill 938. I will turn it over either to Superintendent Balo or Dr. Sale. I'm not sure which. Dr. Sale, I think I've been told which. Good morning, and we look forward to the presentation.
Good morning. Well, thank you, President Gecker, Vice President Mann, members of the board, and Superintendent Balo. I hope I'm correct in receiving it as an honor and privilege that I was cast as your first presentation for many of our new board members as a welcome. And I'm so glad to see everyone. For those who I haven't had a chance to work with or meet quite yet, my name is Leslie Sale. I am the director of the Office of Policy with the Department of Education, which means I do get to periodically join you all to present on major policy initiatives and work related to General Assembly mandates. Sometimes that's one and the same. And that's exactly what brings me here this morning to discuss one of the bills that was passed during our most recent session in 2022, House Bill 938. So House Bill 938, which was patroned by Delegate Roxanne Robinson, really tasked the collective us in the educational universe of evaluating and reflecting on 6 goals of public education with the intent of making recommendations to the General Assembly in a report due November 30th. You'll see that the 6 goals are bulleted up there and set out explicitly in the language of the bill. But broadly speaking, they address rigor, opportunity, and high expectations in instruction, particularly math, as well as through our pathways to graduation. They have us reflecting on assessments and our measures of student performance, as well as looking at accountability and data transparency. So again, all of this work and reflection will culminate in a report to the General Assembly. But in the meantime, the board has really a critical role to play as conveners of the stakeholder discussion group, which is the kind of crux and core of this work. And we see the board's task kind of unfolding in 2 different ways, helping design the who will participate as part of the stakeholder discussion, and shaping the how. So as you guys can see from the bullet points, these are pretty large, complex concepts that we'll be tackling. So we're really looking to the board to provide us some focus and direction and how we might address these concepts as part of our discussions. And that's really our 2 decision points here today that we'll have the board reflect on and how we have this presentation organized. We'll start by thinking about the who, and then we'll transition over to the how we do this work. For the who and the stakeholder engagement, House Bill 938 does give us a starting point on who should be at the table and thinking about the broader groups we want represented as part of this discussion. But it doesn't prescribe who exactly in terms of groups, associations, or individuals are set to represent these groups, which is where the board has an opportunity to provide some discretion and insight here. Of course, we can engage many of our frequent partners in our collaborative work that involve our educational stakeholders across the state, but wanted to make sure, again, the board had the opportunity to weigh in as the convener of this group and reflect on who's participating. So a key consideration for the board as you all think about the who, of course, compliance and making sure that we have all of the boxes checked and we have all of the right folks at the table, but also thinking about comprehensiveness, inclusivity, as well as productivity. As you all can imagine, a November 30th timeline for producing a report of this scale and magnitude is a pretty big lift. So we want to make sure that this group is well designed to be able to do this work effectively and quickly. So I will actually quickly pause there to allow Superintendent Balo to jump in with any additional context she wants to at this time. And then I'll also ask President Gecker if he wants to break apart the 2 decision points or whether we'll power through on the next piece.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Dr. Sale, thank you so much for the presentation. And it was it's been wonderful to work on this so far. What I can't add anything to it, but maybe I can lend a little bit of context, and that is that that House Bill 938. We've kind of lovingly referred to it as the kitchen sink bill. It gives us a chance to talk about all things education and really shape and frame some of the conversations about education policy in the Commonwealth over the coming months and the coming years. I think that when you look at the timeline of 938, at least for me, it's really daunting. It's really quick work that we need to do. Luckily, we have lots of great folks at the department and in the queue who have offered to help with this work. And I'm sure that we are going to be able to pull it off on time with a stellar product that will, again, sort of be a foothold or a catapult, if you will, into additional policy discussions. Just one thing of note, we have an additional bill that's related to sort of a long-term and more technical conversation about assessment. And we're really counting on House Bill 938 to help to give us some of that stakeholder and some of that root work that will guide us in our discussions about assessment in the future and about just, again, all things education policy. So we're really excited to continue to share updates with you, with the Commonwealth, and with the General Assembly about the work of 938, because it really will be inclusive of many voices on topics that are of interest to us all. So again, Dr. Sell, thank you so much for preparing today's presentation. And my name is on there as a presenter, but I will tell you all I did was read through your wonderful slides. So thank you.
Thank you. And President Gicker, I will again defer to you on whether you want to pause here for discussion on this particular decision point, or if you'd like to power through and hear more about the actual individual goals and how we
See if
might
there are any
suggest
questions from the board first. Any board members have questions about where we are and what we're doing?
Okay.
Let's power through.
Wonderful. As I mentioned, we organized this presentation into two pieces, the who and the how. So this is the second part, which really focuses in on the how. As you all saw from the bill language, the topics that we're discussing right now are framed as goals. So we wanted to think about how we reframe those or distill those 6 goals of public education into reflection points and action items for our stakeholder groups. So in the following slides, our staff has offered some preliminary questions and considerations that, again, are meant to frame these goals more as prompts. And in preparing these frameworks, we considered a few different things. We wanted to create concepts or questions and considerations that we thought could be meaningfully and discreetly addressed in the time allotted. Also things that we could reasonably address in the time allotted. So we really tried to focus in on what we consider to be the core issues at the heart of the discussion. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that we were advancing relevant and contemporary discussions. So any recommendations that come from these discussions really contribute to our ongoing debates and conversations around education dilemmas and questions and policymaking. So wanted it to be a current discussion. So we have these organized in the 6 different goals, and I will quickly walk through how we have recommended we might frame the task for stakeholder discussion, and again, we'll turn it back over to the board to further suss these out. Goal 1, which is promoting excellence and instruction in student achievement and mathematics. I will say that perhaps this is the most narrow of our task in front of us. And so what we did with this at the high level is really reframed the goal itself into an action item, an action discussion point. So you'll see it's just kind of reformatted as a question there. But what we did do with the sub-bullets is try to prompt and give our stakeholders a way that we can think about existing levers and existing avenues to make policy changes. So currently we're going through the Mathematics Standards of Learning review process. On a biennial basis, the board does hear about the standards of quality and how they might offer prescriptions on how to improve and move those forward. We also have things like teacher education and licensure that might be an avenue or vehicle for us to make sure mathematics instruction is indeed promoting excellence and achievement for our students. And in that last bullet there, we also wanted to prompt our stakeholders in thinking about access as a prerequisite to achievement. Our next goal is expanding the Advanced Studies Diploma as an option for students in public high schools. So our first question is kind of an orienting question for our stakeholders, and making sure the core priorities and the design of the Advanced Studies Diploma would remain intact for any changes or redesign of such a diploma, that being rigor, high expectations, and college and career readiness. We also wanted to spend some time with our stakeholders to make sure we were discerning what are perceived versus real challenges and barriers to accessing the Advanced Studies Diploma. And in doing so, I think we will be able to better reflect and make recommendations on how we approach those issues. Some of it might be educational and information and messaging to overcome some of those perceived barriers. But those true challenges and real barriers that may require policy solutions, we can start to think about what those are, better understand them so we can respond. Our third goal is increasing transparency, or specifically increasing the transparency of performance measures of public schools. As many of you all know, our existing data reporting and accountability systems are quite robust. So meaning that we already have valuable insights to come from this data and information. So what we can and do offer is pretty substantive already. But we wanted to think about visibility and accessibility as functions of transparency here. So when we think about availability, we also wanted to think about what's understandable and digestible to our end users, recognizing that our end users are not just the folks who are steeped in education policy and the accreditation model and have a familiarity with the data and what it means, but these are our parents, our families, our school communities, and even students trying to make sense of the data. So making sure that, again, accessible and digestible. Goal 4. This is a lengthy one. Ensuring the performance measures for public schools prioritize the attainment of grade level proficiency and growth during the course of a school year from school year, in reading and mathematics for all students, especially in grades kindergarten through 5. So our current assessment and accountability model does take into account growth and achievement, and wanted to start by reflecting on that baseline and what we already do. And we know that the value of understanding both growth and proficiency was a driving part of making sure that these are accounted for in our assessment and accreditation models. But we wanted the stakeholder group to think about how we might recalibrate those assessment and accreditation models to make sure we're putting the emphasis in the right place, and we're appropriately weighting the emphasis of growth and proficiency as part of those models. And you'll see, again, those questions really kind of honing in on finding that right balance and striking that. Goal 5, ensuring the proficiency standards on the standards of learning assessments and reading and mathematics are maintained. And you'll see the question here. I think it's probably fairly straightforward for us. So should the current methodology for setting the cut scores for proficiency standards on our SOL assessments be modified? And this is an opportunity to open the door and think about alternatives. So does our existing methodology for cut scores still work for us in the Commonwealth, or is there an alternative that would better align with our expectations for proficiency in the state? And lastly, goal 6, which is ensuring a strong accreditation system that promotes meaningful accountability year over year. And we saw this task as kind of making sure that our accountability system and accreditation model was as real time as possible, so that we have a clear picture of school performance on a year-to-year basis. And in that way, we can be responsive when we're trending in the wrong direction. So we have the information that we need to empower ourselves to make meaningful change and provide the technical assistance to those schools and divisions who need that support the most, which again requires us to have data at our fingertips as quickly as possible to reflect on that. And that brings us to the end of the second part of the presentation. So again, hoping to turn it back to the board and Superintendent Balo to have us think through those 2 decision points on who we want to bring to the table for this discussion, recognizing that there are certain groups that we must have represented, and whether we are giving the right direction and focus to our stakeholder group to be able to provide our reports that we can send over to the General Assembly. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, I do. So thank you very much, Dr. Sale and Superintendent Balo for walking us through this. This is sounds very interesting, and it talks about student achievement in mathematics and It's awesome to see the SOL review process going through, and I hope it's offers our students more rigorous standards. I'm very keen to see what the nuts and bolts, the implementation piece of it. SOLs are great, but down to the school level, how are we going to really ensure that the SOLs are the standard learnings are there, that accelerated learning is offered for those students for whom the basic curriculum is not enough. So that would be, I would be very keen to see that. The second point I just wanted to make is that for the task, which talks about the accountability year over year for accreditation, is that I'm hoping that this is for all students. It encompasses all students. And if there are any changes in assessments made, that any formulae or calculations account for the fact, and we still continue to get accountability year over year.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I will note that I'm going to take diligent notes about our discussion here, but I will add just a disclaimer. The good news is that we don't have to answer these questions today. Just make sure that we're asking the right questions as we move forward. So I will take notes and hopefully can provide context where appropriate, but may not be able to jump in with an answer today.
I really like this. This was exciting to read the slide deck when it was sent to us. So I think this is an exciting bill and a great opportunity. I just have a push on the math. I think a lot of us are getting really exhausted with this fight over advanced math, which is all about like particular tests and particular prerequisites. And the action on advanced math is in elementary school. It's in the early grades. And when you look at the data, you see gaps, and those are emerging race and ethnic lines, gender, which like is sort of inexplicable in elementary school math. And so I would urge us, when we're thinking about that, we can get focused on the tests, and those are important issues. I don't want to minimize them, but that we're looking holistically and asking if we want to prepare the next cohort of kids to be able to take advanced classes, have different kinds of opportunities. What do we need to be doing like the moment that they first make contact with our schools and in those early grades?
And we did have a question in there reflecting on access in middle school, so we could think about broadening that conversation to our elementary school population too.
President Gecker?
Yes, Dr. Mann. Good morning.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Sorry, I can't be there in person. Thank you so much, Dr. Sale, for your presentation. I think given that there's a very short turnaround time around which a report is going to have to be made, I think one of the things I'm interested in appreciating is just the ability of the staff to amass the data that's going to be needed to inform some of this conversation, particularly with respect to goals 1 and 5. I think it's great that there is a very broad stakeholder base that's in place to provide perspective, but I do think the importance of really making sure that those stakeholders will have access to data that really helps inform their thinking about some of these very important issues, still super important. Again, given the short timeline, I think the other thought that I had, and there may not be an appetite for this, but I offer it in the spirit of really wanting to fashion an approach to solving some of these issues, just wondering about whether there might be room for a couple of board members to be engaged in this, in as much as it is going to come back to the board. So those are the comments that I had in looking over the materials. Thank you again for the presentation and putting forth some very important framing questions that stakeholders will have an opportunity to engage around.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Dr. Mann. This is Emily. I'm not sure if you can see me on camera or not. I think that your points are certainly well taken, and something that we as staff have been thinking about as well, and definitely want to engage board members in these discussions early on, not necessarily just when the report comes back to the board. From just kind of a process standpoint, we are already working with our entire team here to work on some briefings and make sure that stakeholders have the data and the information they need to appropriately frame this discussion. So we don't have those items finalized yet, but they are already in the works to make sure we have a comprehensive, holistic approach to all these discussions and folks feel like they have the information they need.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Gecker. Thank you for the presentation. As is often the case, timeline is the challenge here. So I think I heard the front end is that this is going to be kind of a pretty impressive team assembled. I know there's already interest in a lot of the school divisions, people wanting to serve and represent their regions and whatnot. So I think I heard you say that you might even lean on some members of this group for ongoing work, including looking at the outcomes of Delegate Van Valkenburg's bill as amended by the governor, to look at assessment. So I think if you're going to go to that effort, assembling this team, looking for ways to use them in the future is probably a very, very good idea, because this is pretty time compressed to assemble a bunch of really good thought leaders. My only other thought is that I would encourage folks to, we talk on the history side about using primary sources. The school quality profile is a primary source, and there's tons of rich data already there. And I would encourage people to spend 10 or 15 minutes at school quality profiles, seeing what already exists, which is already there, that you can make sense of on your own by clicking around, and maybe rely a little less on what you hear and what you glean from social media. Because I think there's a lot of good stuff there. And so maybe part of the challenge is help people understand what is there and how it's accessible.
Ms. Creasy.
Mr. President, I would just kind of echo those comments, because I believe as we look at what this does for our students and their families and their achievement, I think it's extremely important for us to keep in mind how we're messaging this to our students and their families. How do students access higher level classes? And how are we preparing our administrations, our school divisions, to ensure that that communication is there? You know, I understand the school quality profile is there. That's all really well and good. But a lot of our parents and families get very overwhelmed looking and trying to read and understand that information. We need to give it to them in a way that they can understand it, a way that provides them an easy access point to say, yes, I believe my child, needs this opportunity, and how do I make sure they get that opportunity? And so that for me is a critical piece of what comes out of this.
Yeah, Mr. President, can I pick up? I think that I would urge us to think about also making it real for parents, because we talk about proficiency, we talk about pass rates. What does that actually mean? And how can we make that? Does that mean what is your child prepared for? Or if your child is at a certain point on the SOL, does that mean they can read the op-ed page of a newspaper? They can read a set of instructions or something they're going to be asked at the DMV? Because I think helping people understand what we're talking about, I think it's important in terms of improvements. People understand where we are, but also it makes it real, because I worry the technical jargon it's useful, and people are going to look at, people in the field are going to be like, oh, I know the difference between what it means to pass the SOL, what it means to be proficient, and so forth. But how do we make that for parents? They can actually know what does it actually mean for their kid, what their kid is excelling at, where their kid might need more help and support, and make that actionable. Lexiles are sort of one way to do that, but I think there's many others just to help people know, what does it mean for you in just real life, kitchen table terms.
Hansen.
I agree with everything that's been said. I just also, maybe circling back to Dr. Mann's comment, I think the findings in and of itself are going to be a challenge, but the recommendations are going to be very key for the legislature. And so I think that, again, the engagement of the board as best we can, and to make sure that we're plugged into that process, because the recommendations are going to be key from a timing standpoint of what would be coming up to the next sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to leave the high-minded stuff to the rest of the board, and I'm going to get down into the sort of the practicality of what the legislation requires, if that's okay. As I read it, our job as the board is really just to collaborate with the superintendent and with the secretary to convene the stakeholder group. how much progress, if any, has the department and the secretary, or have the department and the secretary made in terms of identifying and beginning to invite the stakeholder groups to, from the various categories? I mean, as has been pointed out, the time frame is pretty short. This board would normally spend, a couple of years studying, I wouldn't say each of these items, but almost all of these items would be a couple of years worth of study to see where we've been, possibilities for alternatives, and then real policy recommendations. And so once you get the group together, what's the realistic expectation of what the work product's going to be? Is it going to be essentially a laundry list, in your view, of potential recommendations? Or is it going to, propose specific legislation? Where do you think you're headed? Because the study time here is very, very short.
Well, and I can jump in as
There are
well
a
too.
couple questions
but,
there. Let's talk first. Let's talk about the mundane first. Where are we in terms of identifying stakeholders and inviting them to the table?
Sure. Well, we didn't want to preempt our board discussion and bringing anyone together because, again, we do have a list in front of us of the groups that need to be represented, but
Right.
wanted to make sure that you all felt comfortable with that being a comprehensive list of.
It's legislatively mandated, that list, right? So it doesn't matter. I mean, I am comfortable with it. Don't read this the wrong way, but it really doesn't matter if I'm comfortable or not, if the board's comfortable. This is the
When-
mandate.
And Mr. President, more talking about, what specific, association groups, that type of thing, making sure that we're hitting all of those boxes is really
Okay.
kind of what we've been thinking.
So-
And just wanted to make sure that we had your feedback. So,
So
you know,
part of
as-
what the board ought to, sorry, pardon the interruption,
Go ahead.
Emily, but part of what the board ought to be talking about then is, in these categories as laid out legislatively, which groups or what individuals the board members believe ought to be included and invited to the table.
absolutely, that would be
Okay.
incredibly helpful.
So-
We did not want to get ahead of you on that.
Perhaps we could start there. I mean, I think you all have the list of, at least I hope we have the list of the required stakeholders.
Yes,
Yep.
it should be in the boilerplate and on slide.
One of the slides had, there it is, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mhm.
I've got the legislation up. I wasn't looking at your slides. I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
Mr. President, I made a rookie move perhaps, and I did preempt the board. I haven't pulled anyone together, but I did send just feelers, emails out to the different associations that are represented in this bill and ask them for recommendations. So I did not preempt in submitting those to Emily or Leslie or anyone else. However, I do have a solid list of potential members who are interested in serving this based on recommendations from others. And I'm also happy to jump in with Dr. Sale and Emily about a little bit about process and how we have it set up to be fairly expedient and efficient.
I think that would be helpful for the board to understand. And frankly, I don't view it as preempting. I mean, the legislation requires us to collaborate, but the primary responsibility for the report lies with you and with the secretary.
Yep, there's a lot of work, so we didn't want to waste a moment. We've also engaged what we call our comprehensive center. We have a few that we work with across the nation, and we engaged one of them to help us just facilitate this work so that we could do the work. And so once we have this discussion and have some consensus on the direction that we move, the membership makeup, some of the different items and priorities that we're discussing right now, we'll pull that group together and have our comprehensive center. They're poised to bring in subject matter experts and basically break this group for 938 into the 6 different topic areas. And so it's not that a group will come together and try to come up with recommendations for all 6 topic areas. They'll be very focused. Then they'll coalesce and bring those recommendations together, massage them, and prep them for presentation to the board, where we anticipate and hope for as robust of a conversation as we're having today to really finalize those before they go to the General Assembly. If I'm forgetting something or not being complete with that, please jump in.
Yeah.
So let's talk
Just-
then about the parent groups. I'm assuming we're doing the PTAs, and who are you looking at in terms of the parent groups? And board members, if you have ideas about what parent groups ought to be looked at, now would be a good time to begin addressing it.
Yes, and I think that's one of the items that's open for discussion. The Virginia Parent Teacher Association is certainly one of the groups that we frequently engage with and can certainly bring to the table. But recognizing that parents is a pretty diverse group and wide-reaching group, wanted to make sure that would be adequate as representation, or if there are other folks in mind for you all that you think would be appropriate to bring into the fold here.
And we could certainly have several representatives from the PTA because parents is a large group. We do want to make sure that they are, speaking for as many parents as we can to make sure we're engaging as many folks as we can.
Aside from the PTAs, I think there are also lots of local parent groups, private parent entities, which I believe would like to have a say in their children's education. So I understand PTA is a standard organization, and I would also like it to be more inclusive of other parent groups and parents.
Could you provide us some examples?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Anybody
President
else?
Gecker, to your question, it sounds like Superintendent Balo, you were actually articulating that, in fact, there is a bit of a straw man for a process. And I think it would be great if that information could be shared with the board, because I think to President Gecker's point, the intent is, of course, working collaboratively. And it sounds like you definitely have a frame around how you are envisioning this process coming together expeditiously. So I would hope that maybe on follow-up, perhaps, that could be shared with the board.
Absolutely, we can do that.
President Gecker,
Yes, Dr. Davis-Vaught.
I'd like to also add that if we were taking in different groups of parents, I'd like to make sure that we include all the representatives from all the superintendents' regions as well.
And how does the department feel about that?
Mr. President, I did reach out to VAS and asked for recommendations, and those recommendations in some cases included the representatives from the different regions. We want to make sure that we give superintendents outside of just the region reps an opportunity to have a voice as well. So our default won't be to just say, could the representatives from the different regions serve on this committee? But rather, if you're interested in serving, great, but please also provide some other names from which we can select and vet. So we just want to make sure that we're representative of all voices, not just those that are in leadership positions in the associations.
And I do think, just to piggyback on Superintendent Balo, something that is incredibly important to the board, whether it's, this kind of stakeholder group or your advisory committees, is to make sure we do have regional diversity. And so that is something we're going to ensure across the board on all of these categories. Now, we certainly can't have necessarily a parent from every region and then a superintendent from every region, because that makes the group a little bit unwieldy to manage, but regional diversity is going to be across the board.
Okay, we've got about 2.5 months to get this done, right?
Yes.
We meet in November 16 or thereabouts.
Yes, sir.
And so if it's going to come back to the board, which means you really have to have your committees formed almost now.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay.
And we also plan to provide an interim update to the board as well during the October meeting. We don't just want it to come as a presentation in November or a report in November. We do want to provide you those interim updates as well.
And hopefully to provide a little comfort as well, we have been working with staff to prepare, as Dr. Mann had suggested, the resources and context that we think will help drive the discussion. So when we do convene the stakeholders, with today being the green light, that they'll have what they need to jump into the work, so we won't have any delays or setbacks there.
And we'll be sure to provide those briefings to you as well.
And not to seem like I want to exclude anyone, but as we know, the larger these groups get, sometimes the more difficult it is to reach consensus in a short period of time.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how large do you expect each of the groups to be?
I don't think we had any preconceived notions around size. We were also doing that same kind of calculation around balancing inclusivity with productivity and efficiency here. I know in our preliminary discussions, we had the kind of magic number we seem to always fall back on was between 12 and 15, because we thought that would be a comprehensive of enough group to have some expertise in all of these individual areas, also large enough to break out and still have enough of a critical mass to meaningfully contribute to the discussion without prohibiting or limiting the larger group discussion from being effective. But that was, a rough estimate based on some early kind of, lining up who the stakeholders might be, and we can adjust larger or bigger, assuming that we hit all of these stakeholder categories.
While there are 6 goals that are enumerated in the legislation, there are really more like 4 topics. You have the mathematics topic, you have an accountability topic, assessment topic. And so, while there are a number of goals, we've also envisioned potentially breaking it down into topic areas. Because we do think that stakeholders will be interested in providing their feedback on each of these topic areas, not just being assigned to one topic and having no input in the other areas as well.
I should note that Ms. Holton asked me to mention that while we're addressing the items in HB 938, she wants to prioritize addressing the teacher shortage, which has been growing for many years and has now reached disastrous proportions. I'm assuming that some of this will be geared toward that end. One of the topics will at least discuss the teacher shortage and how we begin to close the gaps.
We can certainly, again, think about how we might incorporate that into some of those framing questions. So it's top of mind for our stakeholders as either, a context for what we're discussing or part of the recommendation or considerations that we need to offer as a solution.
Okay, so in terms of decisions today, what do you need from the board other than our basic consent to the process that you've outlined?
Sure. Well, I think based on the earlier discussion around stakeholders, again, we can engage who we conventionally or traditionally go to in our education universe, but making sure that we weren't missing anyone as Ms. Duda, adding some local parent groups. So making sure that those who we don't normally hear from, again, are top of mind as we do our outreach, and making sure that you all are comfortable with the framing questions. And so I've gotten some guidance from Mr. Rotherham and now President Gecker on some ways that we might adjust and tinker with those questions to make sure that we're getting recommendations and reflections that speak to some of the issues that are important for us. So assuming there's nothing else that we don't want to make sure are top of mind for our stakeholders and us as staff and guiding the discussion, a green light or approval from you all that we've hit the mark on what we're thinking for framework.
I think that, personally, I think the framework is fine. I don't see any dissension around the board. I don't ever speak for the board before the board speaks, but I think I can read this room and nobody has any heartburn. Okay. So we can move forward there. I think it would be appropriate to give board members, pick an arbitrary time until Friday, to let staff know if there are any particular stakeholders or stakeholder groups that they would like to see included in the mix. Is that fair for everybody? Or again, yes?
Did you say close of business Friday?
Sure.
Yes.
Just to give staff a chance to convene, I think the board would like to be informed when we are convening. Absolutely. And have an opportunity to be there if the board wants to be there, if board members want to be there. Mindful, of course, that if more than 3 of us are there, that's problematic. So I'm hopeful that won't be the case. Are you envisioning in-person convening, or are you envisioning something else?
I think we had, just for efficiency's sake, we had thought about virtual. We want some real-time discussion, but recognizing if we're meeting our mark on regional diversity, that would probably require a virtual component of this. And we're also looking at some different ways that we can collect or engage stakeholders that aren't just necessarily real-time oriented. So we want to bring these groups together as regularly as our time frame permits. But there are other ways to collect feedback and engage with these groups in the interim and along the way. So thinking about engagement in a few different modes and mediums. But I think the primary platform will be virtual to make sure that folks, don't feel like they're overcommitting to joining the group and can do so pretty reasonably and
So in
easily.
terms of sequencing meetings, it would seem your first meeting would be both introductory and to give people a chance to ask for what data they think they need. Second, then I'm assuming staff would deliver that data, and then at a subsequent meeting, you would have discussion around the data. Is that fair, or is that?
I think that's probably, it's a very kind of intuitive line and chronology of how this might work. I think we are trying to think as proactively as possible about what context and data we can bring to the table in advance of the introduction. So we can certainly fill in gaps as we recognize them and observe the group needs a little bit more information. But the hope would be even that first meeting to be able to do some constructive work around these with, future meetings getting more into depth and then really honing in on the individual observations and recommendations that we'll bring back to you all.
Would the board support the idea of receiving at least the sort of intro packets sent to each of the 6 different subgroup members? I mean, so that the board could at least review them in advance or have some knowledge of what's going on, or do we just not care about doing that? In other words, if you're going to send out information in advance to people, might it be okay to give that to the board also?
Oh,
Absolutely.
yes, I
Yeah.
think that's a very reasonable request. We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, staff is already working on those briefing documents so that we can provide them to stakeholders in advance for some, I think everyone's going to have to do a little bit of homework in between these meetings to make sure we're meeting our timeline.
All right, so the anticipation would be you'd be back here November 16 or 17. Emily, help me with that.
Sure.
One
So-
of those dates.
Yeah, so we do
With the final
anticipate
report.
bringing the report to you all in November. I do believe it's the 16th. It may be the 17th. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But we also anticipate a presentation to the board at the October meeting to provide an interim update as well.
Okay, and for us, neither of those two are action items. Because the final submission really is, again, legislatively, the superintendents and the secretaries.
Correct. I think we would like to have some consensus,
Sure.
since this
Absolutely.
is a collaboration between the board and the secretary and the superintendent, but I don't envision this being an actual action item. I don't think that the legislation requires that.
No, although it does seem, although the legislation talks about implementing where possible, that there's really nothing on that list that is implementable by bodies other than us or the legislature.
Correct.
Is that fair? I mean, I don't want to overstate that, but a quick read suggests that would be the case. And so despite what, or whatever came out would end up becoming a board or legislative study item in any event.
Yes,
Is that fair?
I do think that's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I do think just to Mr. Hansen's question earlier, I think some of these are going to be recommendations that the board can run with. Some may be recommendations that turn into legislation. I'm not sure that we would have enough time to flesh out actual language or legislative proposals. More that these are, items for the legislature and for the board to consider moving forward on whether it's a regulatory action or legislative action.
Okay. And can I ask one question that really is more in the weeds than I'd like to, but since cut scores have been such a big topic, what are you contemplating with regard to changes in the system? I know we use in Virginia the modified Angoff method. I know Wyoming, for example, uses a slightly different method. Is the contemplation we would shift toward, and Wyoming, by the way, uses the method used by a majority of the states, as I understand it, is that we would shift away from modified Angoff to something like, the majority method?
I don't think we make any assumptions in that
Okay.
regard.
Everybody's looking for
Yeah,
Shelly.
and there she is. But we want to make sure that there's an opportunity again to make sure that's still the right fit for the Commonwealth and reflect on the alternative methods and methodologies that exist. I don't think we assume that there would be any resulting shift if we find that the Angoff method is still adequate in serving our purpose, but that largely in part of the task we're assigning to our stakeholder group is to do some of that reflection work.
And certainly, Mr. President, this is, as you know, has been a topic for the board for a couple of years now around cut scores and more recently on what that method is. I think this is just more of a discussion piece. Again, not one that necessarily shows we're going to be making a shift, but a piece of discussion that we need to kind of move forward and evaluate how we do set our cut scores.
It's okay. I just wanted a chance to use the words that Shelley taught me. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? All right, so we are committed Friday, close of business. If you have suggestions for groups or individuals for the committees that the department can take into account, they would not be, by the way, considered mandated to the department. They are suggestions, not mandates, even though they're coming from board members. You get to, exercise independent judgment as to who you want on the final committees. Is that okay with everybody on the board?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Dr. Sale.
much.
We appreciate it. Anything else in the work session?
That's all for work session.
That's it. All right. We are, work session is closed then. We'll be back at 10 o'clock for the full board meeting.
Thanks.
Dan, just a couple of things. I told you I was going to be gone in September. I won't be. I'll be there.
We're going to call to order the August meeting of the Board of Education. If we could in the audience, just keep it down to a, thank you, appreciate that. In months past, by the way, the audience has been much better. They quieted down immediately. We never had to ask. No, we appreciate everybody's being here today. As you can see, we, finally back to a full complement on the Board of Ed, all 9 members. I know all of them are not here. I would note that Dr. Mann is participating remotely for a personal reason. Dr. Davis is participating remotely due to a medical reason. Ms. Holton will be participating remotely due to a personal reason, and pursuant to our bylaws, I have approved their electronic participation. Please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, as mentioned, we have 5 new members of the state board. The new members were all appointed by Governor Youngkin on June 30, 2022. And I'd like to welcome each of them here today and give them a minute to introduce themselves to the public, both here in the room and watching us on YouTube. We'll start with Mr. Rotherham.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to be here, an honor to be back. They say brevity is the soul of wit, so I hope in a second you think I'm very witty. I'm a parent of 2 public school students in Virginia and the husband of a public school teacher, and it's terrific to be here and have this opportunity to serve. A little older, maybe a little wiser, we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome aboard, Ms. Dutta.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Suparna Datta, and I'm a mom of 2 who've gone through Fairfax County Public Schools. I'm just a regular mom, and I'm very humbled to be here. I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues here and making Virginia a great place for education. Thank you.
Mr. Hansen.
I'm Bill Hansen, live in McLean, Virginia, and likewise, just come at this more than anything as a parent. I've got 6 married children and 16 grandchildren, and all 6 of my kids graduated from McLean High School. I graduated from Yorktown High School in Arlington, where I grew up, and all 16 of my grandkids live in Virginia as well. So this is personal and important to me as we look to our next generation of students and leaders in our country.
Thank you. Dr. Siebert.
Good morning. Thank you, President Gecker. Alan Siebert. I currently serve as Constituent Services Officer in Government Relations for Roanoke City Public Schools, and that is a part-time position. I served for 15 years as superintendent in Salem City Schools and 30 years in total in the city of Salem Schools, where I was a student teacher before a teacher and assistant principal, and superintendent. And so I've enjoyed serving children and families from the division perspective. I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to serve on this distinguished board. I've made many trips to Richmond over the decades and participated in many processes, so I'm very thankful for that. But as my colleagues have pointed out, the most important thing is I am a husband and a father of 3, all 3 boys, products of extraordinary public education in Virginia.
And Ms. Creasy.
Good morning. I'm Grace Creasy. I served as a public school teacher for 12 years in Norfolk City Public Schools and in Goochland County Public Schools. Taught U.S. history, government, civics. My love is middle school, although I do ask for lots of prayers because I have my own middle school daughter going into middle school this year. So I'm, ask for all your prayers.
All right. Again, welcome. I will say that when the list came out about who was appointed, I knew of, at least 4 of you and was delighted with the picks the governor made. I think it's the right group. It's a good experience set, and I think the board will do good things moving forward. First item on the agenda then is the approval of minutes from the June 15, 2022 meeting. I hope everybody's had a chance to review the minutes, and if so, can I have a motion to either approve or amend those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Dr. Mann. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Davis-Vaught. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Is that yes? Okay. The thumbs up instead of the aye will do for today. That's approved. Okay, public comment. Board welcomes members of the public to address us during the public comment portion of the business meeting. Speakers will be recognized in the order in which their request was received. Speakers are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes. When your time is up, please close your remarks promptly. We ask that you provide your name and affiliation at the beginning of your remarks. Speakers may provide copies of your comments. You may email a copy of your remarks to Ms. Emily Webb, Director of Board Relations, after you finish speaking. I should also note that as a matter of practice, the board does not respond to or ask questions from the dais during public comment. All comments are shared with the appropriate staff person for follow-up after the meeting. The list today is actually fairly lengthy of people who have asked to speak before the board, which is fine. But in order to expedite or to do this most efficiently, I will call both the speaker and the person following the speaker so that perhaps we can be ready when the time comes. First up is Ms. Candace Lucas, to be followed by Melissa Siddiqui. Ms. Lucas, good morning.
Emily, please don't start my time till you hand out my documents. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. I'll wait till she hands them out so I can be fair. And Melissa Siddiqui is not here. Chairman Gecker.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Following them would be Dan Zacharias. Or Zacharias, excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, board members, Chairman Gecker, and Superintendent Baylor. My name is Candace Lucas. I am a civil rights activist that works on behalf of children with disabilities throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the nation. What I have provided you is a resource guide to assist you in ensuring that academic justice is restored to Virginia for children with disabilities and children of color. The first resource I provided you is called Willful Defiance. This is a book that was written by Dr. Mark Warren, who is with the University, I believe, of Boston. We assisted him in writing this book. He characterized and outlines the violations and the civil rights massive resistance efforts that are going on in Virginia, in Henrico, Chesterfield, throughout many school divisions, and how egregious they are. So please read this at your leisure when you get the opportunity so you can understand what's going on directly from the families. I provided you a copy of what we call the Purple Book. These are the regulations regarding special education in Virginia. It has not been updated for almost 2 decades. I'm a licensed educator, licensed administrator, a licensed to practice special education in 4 areas of disabilities. This is an egregious situation when we have a policy that's not being followed by school divisions, not being followed by the board, not being followed by the VDOE. It's outdated. Please read that and understand that this is outdated. The last thing I have for you is called the critical decision points for families of children with disabilities. We give this to every parent that goes into an IEP meeting, a special education meeting. When parents ask these questions to school divisions, and even to you, Dr. Balo, we get no responses, or we're called disruptors, or we're saying that we're told that we're delaying the process. And you guys are the ones that said that we have to use these questions to get information regarding our kids to make critical decisions. Okay, so I want you to understand that parents are asking these questions and being disregarded by school divisions, okay? The governor ran on the premise that parents matter. Evidently, you guys didn't get the memo. Our parents are not mattering in the Virginia Department of Education. In fact, parents' rights and children's rights, specifically parents of color, children of color, and parents of students with disabilities and children that have disabilities, their rights are being violated as standard operating procedure in Virginia. Okay, so I want you guys to understand what a crisis we're in right now. Special education should be on your agenda every single month, and you should demand an update. Okay, it should be on your agenda every month. In addition, I want to document that I advise you that I'm fully licensed in the Commonwealth. Samantha Hollins is not. She has a restricted license and she's running the entire state for special education. How can you have faith in her? How is that fair? She can't be a school, she can't even be a principal in the school, but she's over the entire state of Virginia. We need to make some significant changes. We need to gut the special education department in Virginia, and we need to make sure that SB 1288 is implemented, because it's not. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucas. Dan Zacharias, I apologize for the mispronunciation, to be followed by Robert Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. It's Dan Zacharias.
I got close.
That's fine. I've heard every possible pronunciation. Emily is handing you a hard copy of an open letter that we sent to the governor a few weeks ago. And we sent you a digital copy. I don't expect it to have come to your attention yet, because I know you have a ton of things on your plate, and I appreciate that. And it's a lengthy letter. I don't have time to give you the details of all, but I want to just highlight a couple of things. It regards our opinions. And by the way, I'm director of the Old Dominion Association of Church Schools. I forgot to mention that. I apologize. Our concerns about the current direction of early childhood policy. And so I want to ask you a series of questions. Would it be good policy in the Commonwealth of Virginia for the state to subsidize, directly subsidize, private K-12 schools, or to apply the standards of learning to private K-12 schools, or to establish a quality rating system for private K-12 schools, or a unified public-private system for K-12? I hope those suggestions sound strange to you. They do to me. But that's what we're doing for Birth to 5 right now. We are directly subsidizing private and even religious, and in some cases church-run preschools and daycares. We are making them align their curricula with the new Birth to 5 learning standards. All of these things which would seem absurd for K-12. So what's being set up in Virginia right now is contradictory models of standard setting and assessment between private and public K-12 and Birth to 5. And we're concerned about that. We don't know the direction that it's headed, and we're concerned that it could be headed in a direction that would be dangerous to our autonomy, especially with regard to curricula. So we're concerned about that. The letter includes a history of the religious exemption from child care licensure from an ODAC's perspective, which we hope will be helpful to you, as well as specific points of concern that we have. And I appreciate your time and appreciate your attention to that matter when you get a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rigby, followed by Zoe Aquino.
Good morning. My name is Robert Rigby Jr. I'm a 30-plus year veteran teacher in public schools in Virginia. I'm current vice president for advocacy for the Fairfax County Council of PTAs. PTAs have been advocating for improved mental health services for children all of my life, and our council has set it as a priority this year. Advocacy here in Virginia has had some impact, reducing minimum ratios for counselors to students and at last setting minimum ratios for mental health clinical staff to students. Current minimums in Virginia are 3 social workers, psychologists, behavior analysts, and nurses all together per 1,000 students. It's only a fraction of what's recommended by the professional organizations, and it comes nowhere near to meeting the needs of Virginia students and staff. Mental health of the students and staff in our schools is the business of the Virginia Board of Education. We're not just asking for training and policies. We're asking for more clinical staffing for mental health, not to mention nurses for health in general. Please attend to this in your standards of quality or advocacy for such this year. Awareness of the mental health crisis among children and staff in schools has been growing over the years. During this pandemic, it's reached intolerable levels. You know as well as I the dreadful stats on suicide. But the mental health of students and their educators has drastic effects on all educational outcomes, including missed days, graduation rates, academic success, education and work outcomes after K-12 schooling, and of course its impact on families. Imagine what would happen with adequate staffing. We could have much more proactive mental health, not just crisis intervention. Drop-in hours for students, staff, and families, more targeted general groups, more of everything. Our stakeholder, parents, guardians, staff, and students say we need this. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Zoe Aquino, followed by Jeff Gervin. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, and members of the board. My name is Zoe Aquino. I am with Hansen Center, a community-based organization that advocates and organizes with Asian Americans in Virginia. And we urge the board to vote for the first review of the History and Social Sciences Standards of Learnings, or SOLs, and proceed in the review process. The majority of our staff and community member base were or currently are K-12 students in Virginia's public schools, including myself. And we can attest that these revised standards are a significant improvement over previous SOLs and a great starting point for broader community feedback. It is clear that these SOLs have been reviewed with close attention and deep intention by the Department of Education staff over the last 2 years, aided by 200 experts on 9 review committees and over 5,000 public comments already. Our community base engaged over 400 people this past summer to inform Virginians about this process and encourage them to provide feedback. And some of the most enthusiastic responses came from current or former students and teachers in Virginia's K-12 public schools. However, current students and teachers were hesitant about participating in this process because of their scholastic goals and priorities. Yes, this process is important to them. They know the direct impact these SOLs will make on their students, communities, and futures, and they want to be a part of that impact. But there just isn't enough time during the school year when priorities shift to student success. Between classes, after-school activities, clubs, grades, something has to take a backseat, right? Delaying the review process prevents the people most impacted by the SOL revisions from providing feedback. If everyday students and teachers aren't aware of this critical opportunity or able to give timely feedback, then I think it's worth considering. Who do we want feedback from? And how will these SOLs impact them more than Virginia's K-12 public school students and teachers? The proposed SOLs should proceed. Experts have weighed in, and so many residents are ready to engage. And Hansen Center specifically looks forward to encouraging Asian American Virginians in the near future to engage with regional public hearings and community information sessions on the revised standards. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Jeff Gervin, followed by Nicole Cole. Mr. Gervin. Nicole Cole.
They're texting saying they can't hear. The chat has popped up.
Yeah. We have a technical issue. Is that what's going on?
I don't know. I saw pop up. Yeah, let's go. Maybe she went like this. I just noticed.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to get straight to it. I'm Nicole Cole, a Spotsylvania County School Board member speaking for myself on behalf of the children in Spotsylvania County Public Schools. I'm addressing you today for 3 reasons. I trust you accepted your appointment to the Virginia Board of Education because you, like I, have a passion for seeing the children of our state have the greatest opportunity for success in our schools. I would imagine your board wants to maintain and protect the integrity of the processes, policies, and Virginia laws and be viewed as making integrous and ethically sound decisions for our children. And if you are not aware, there may have been nefarious and possibly illegal actions to poison the process whereby you certify applicants for superintendent, your ability to make good decisions for the children in our state is undermined. Thus, I was compelled to make you aware that the Spotsylvania School Board did not ever hold a public vote to provide a recommendation for any option 4 superintendent candidate. So it is possible the application you were provided is not complete and could be fraudulent. I am requesting that you question the application before you. First, did the candidate, Mark Taylor, knowingly submit an application to include an unlawfully provided recommendation? Please consider what is known about Mr. Taylor. 1, he has worked years in county government, not school, positions which include service to an elected board. In service to an elected board as a county attorney and later as a very small county executive, this candidate should be aware of Virginia Code 2.23710A. Unless otherwise specifically provided by law, no vote of any kind of the membership or any part thereof of any public body shall be taken to authorize the transaction of any public business other than a vote taken at a meeting conducted in accordance with the provisions of this chapter. It is public knowledge that Mr. Taylor and the chair of our school board, Kirk Twigg, have a long-standing and close friendship. Mr. Taylor was aware he was applying for option 4 superintendent certification, the only certification option under 8 VAC 2023-630 that requires a board, not board member, recommendation. So I ask you now, how could Mr. Taylor not know the recommendation was unlawfully provided by his friend Kirk Twigg? As a Spotsy School Board member, I absolutely can say the Spotsylvania County Public School Board never approved a recommendation by a lawful public vote for anyone this year. It is possible that Twigg, who has been accused multiple times, has possibly broken the law again. This time, he not only took away my vote and the voice of Spotsylvania's parents and citizens, but he is also trying to manipulate you. Still, the question for you is, did the option 4 candidate before you knowingly submit an unlawful recommendation with his application? Does Mark Taylor share a role in Twigg's possible manipulation of each of you, the Board of Education? If you feel that is the case, you should deny this option 4 application, if only to maintain the integrity of our state laws, your board, and the superintendent certification process. Thank you.
Thank you. We are experiencing some technical issue. We need to log back in, so we're going to take a very quick pause here to allow the IT folks to do that. Next speaker, by the way, will be Dr. Ayers, followed by Frank Callahan.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Nicole Cole, a Spotsylvania County School Board member speaking for myself on behalf of the children in Spotsylvania County Public Schools. I am addressing you today for 3 reasons. I trust you accepted your appointment to the Virginia School Board of Education because you, like I, have a passion for seeing the children of our state have the greatest opportunity for success in our schools. I would imagine your board wants to maintain and protect the integrity of the processes, policies, and Virginia laws and be viewed as making integrous and ethically sound decisions for our children. If you are not aware, there may have been nefarious and possibly illegal actions to poison the process whereby you certify applicants for superintendent, your ability to make good decisions for the children of our state is undermined. Thus, I was compelled to make you aware that the Spotsylvania School Board did not ever hold a public vote to provide a recommendation for any option 4 superintendent candidate. So it is possible the application you were provided is not complete and could be fraudulent. I am requesting that you question the application before you. First, did the candidate Mark Taylor knowingly submit an application to include an unlawfully provided recommendation? Please consider what is known about Mr. Taylor. He has worked years in county government, not school, positions which include service to an elected board. In service to an elected board as a county attorney and later as a very small county executive, this candidate should be aware of Virginia Code 2.2-3710A. Unless otherwise specifically provided by law, no vote of any kind of the membership or any part thereof of any public body shall be taken to authorize the transaction of any public business other than a vote taken at a meeting conducted in accordance with the provisions of this chapter. It is public knowledge that Mr. Taylor and the chair of our school board, Kurt Twigg, have a long-standing close relationship. Mr. Taylor was aware he was applying for option 4 superintendent certification, the only certification option under 8 VAC 2023-630 that requires a board, not board member, recommendation. So I ask you now, how could Mr. Taylor not know the recommendation was unlawfully provided by his friend Kurt Twigg? As a Spotsy school board member, I can absolutely say the Spotsylvania County Public School Board never approved a recommendation by a lawful public vote for anyone this year. It is possible that Twigg, who has been accused multiple times, has possibly broken the law again. This time he not only took away my vote and the voice of Spotsylvania parents and citizens, but he is also trying to manipulate you. Still, the question for you is, did the option 4 candidate before you knowingly submit an unlawful recommendation with his application? Does Mark Taylor share a role in Twigg's possible manipulation of each of you, the Board of Education? If you feel that is the case, you should deny this option 4 application, if only to maintain the integrity of our state laws, your board, and the superintendent certification process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ayers?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Edward Ayers. Lived in Virginia 42 years, raised 2 kids, went to public schools and public universities. For 27 of those years, I was professor and dean of arts and sciences at the University of Virginia. The last 15 years, I was president and now professor at the University of Richmond. And during all that time, I taught and wrote American history, despite my mom's question when I told her I was going to go to graduate school in history. She was a 5th grade teacher in Sullivan County, Tennessee, right over the Virginia line down near Bristol. And she said, well, honey, what for? We already know what happened. That's the perspective many people have about history, is that we know what happened. Our job is to memorize those names and dates. We have a chance in Virginia to move beyond that, to lead the nation in a sort of inquiry-based learning in social studies that we've long used in science and in business education. I've helped work on this standard for a couple of years, and I've been very impressed with the care and the thought that's gone into this revision. The extent of involvement by parents, students, citizens, and teachers, as well as historians, is remarkable. And of course, you're scheduled to have much more input before they are accepted. I think you're on the right track, and it's good that students will have these soon. The setbacks of the pandemic have been hard, and teachers are eager to have the new SOLs. I hope you will proceed with the first review as scheduled. Now, I've taught thousands of young people, most of them from Virginia, who have just finished high school and arrived in college. And to show them history was not, in fact, a list of names and dates, I sent them all to the library to read a single issue of an American magazine from 1949 and write an essay about what they found there. They expressed amazement at how interesting history actually was, to see that everything happened at the same time, to encounter the many perspectives, to see that things were just as complicated then as they are now, and most of all, to see that the history people lived then still resonates today. We then turned to talk about individuals, and even a name and a date here and there, about the Cold War and Korea and the economy and politics, but they understood why it mattered. It wasn't just a list of things to work through, but rather they came with questions that they wanted to answer. At UR, I've taught a freshman seminar called Touching the Past. Students there tell me they're still interested in history in college for 2 reasons. One, they had a great teacher in middle school or high school or they visited a place that made a big impact on them. Fortunately, we are rich in great teachers and powerful sites in Virginia. I've served on the boards of many history organizations, nationally and in Virginia, including Colonial Williamsburg and Fort Monroe. And I've seen that the history students' experience there will resonate with the proposed revisions. Students come to those evocative places from public schools, from private schools, and from home schools with questions and leave with new questions, just as they should and just as they will with the new SOLs. When I addressed the National Governors Association a couple of years ago on this subject, I was heartened by how many governors agreed that there's no more important subject we teach than American history, but that we've neglected it in favor of supposedly more useful subjects. There is, in fact, no more useful subject than understanding your own country. We have an obligation to teach that history with what we know, and fortunately, you folks are on the right track to do so. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Callahan, followed by Jeff Coop.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on the issue of the new history standards. I am here representing the Virginia NAACP's Educational Committee. I have over 40 years of experience in teaching history in Pennsylvania. During this time, I served on several statewide commissions, which reported both to the Department of Education as well as the Pennsylvania Senate and House Educational Committees. My extensive experience in this field has led me to believe in two guiding principles of public education. One, when in the classroom, your goal must be focused on making your students the most productive members of society. And two, almost all decisions in public education are political ones. Much work has already been done to generate the current proposed standards. This includes over 500 comments from individuals and experts in the field, focusing on what is best for Virginia students. These proposals include more coverage of Black history and more inclusion and representation of minority groups in Virginia and U.S. history. These recommendations must remain in the revised standards. In some cases, political decisions are for the betterment of the students and the educational system. However, far too often, political officials make educational decisions to promote their own political agenda. I trust that your decision will improve education in the classroom and not be made for political gains. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Coop, followed by Rich Lieberman. Mr. Coop? Mr. Lieberman? Welcome. Sure.
Thank you. Distinguished board members, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I'm grateful we have a board that believes in following the law and appreciate those of you who were appointed by Governor Youngkin, as well as those of you who were appointed by the previous administration. A board can only truly represent citizens by having intelligent dialogue with people from all perspectives. My name is Rich Lieberman. I'm a resident of Spotsylvania County. I'm also a father of two, one who's graduated Spotsylvania schools and a current middle school student. I'm here today to discuss with the Spotsylvania School Board has stated they want a new superintendent. Excuse me. From the job advertisement, Spotsylvania County was looking for someone who is, quote, a trusted public education leader who values ethics and integrity by practicing moral authority and leads by example through honest practices. Why do I and other Spotsylvania residents care? Because we have children in our school system, because our property values are affected by our public schools, because businesses decide to locate or leave our county based on the reputation of our schools. Recently, our school system's become a national laughingstock, and we need a leader who can get us back on track. Mr. Taylor does not meet these qualifications that were advertised in the job announcement. He also does not meet what the community stated we wanted as a leader in publication, or not what we were assured was going to happen by our school board. Mr. Taylor has zero experience as an education leader. What's even more important is the fact he's being offered the job appears to be fruit from a poison tree. What do I mean by that? Mr. Taylor's close friends with our current school board chair, Mr. Twigg. In fact, Mr. Taylor's wife assisted with Mr. Twigg's political campaign. In other words, this appears to be the good old boy stuff Spotsylvania has worked hard to get away from. Additionally, Mr. Taylor was seen meeting with at least two of the current school board members in the weeks following the November 2021 election. Again, fruit from a poison tree. Why does this board care about what I've mentioned? Everyone should care because the potential legal ramifications for Mr. Taylor's appointment could further damage the reputation of Spotsylvania County Schools. However, as Ms. Cole stated, let me give you a simple legal reason why this board should deny the application. Very simply, he does not qualify using any of the options available. The only option he could be considered under is option 4. The problem with Mr. Taylor's application, he does not meet the criteria in 4C. This states, be recommended by our Virginia school board interested in employing the individual as a superintendent. While I presume Mr. Taylor has individual recommendations from at least the chair of the Spotsylvania School Board, as Ms. Cole said, there has been no vote by the board. As you're aware, the chair is only one of 7 votes, and a vote would be required before a recommendation could be submitted to you. Based on what's in the best interest for Spotsylvania County and the fact that Mr. Taylor does not, in fact, meet the qualifications for being granted a license, I respectfully ask you to deny his license at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Chad Stewart, followed by Philip Thompson.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. President and new members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Chad Stewart, and I'm a policy analyst with the 40,000 member strong Virginia Education Association. I'm here to speak on behalf of the VA for the proposed history standards in item I and H pertaining to lab school grant funds. On the history standards, the VA is generally pleased with the proposed new standards and see them as a significant improvement over the previous standards. The sequencing by theme, higher level of rigor for making connections, and overall pedagogy are designed in a thoughtful manner and will lead to richer discussions and critical thinking for our students. We also appreciate how transparent the process has been for providing input on the standards. After thousands of comments and assembling multiple groups of experts from diverse backgrounds, we are heartened that such a comprehensive and inclusive approach was taken to ensure that every line in this document was scrutinized and reviewed by multiple experts. While there are some items we plan to give technical comment on during the upcoming public comment sessions, we feel the proposed process for final input at this stage makes sense, and we encourage VBOE members to advance these standards. On a separate topic, we sent a communication to all board members this week noting some technical concerns we have with the lab school guidelines. There is currently a mistake in the guidelines suggesting that private institutions and community colleges qualify for the new lab school grant funding. Subsection F of item 137C44 in state budget makes clear that the expanded definition of lab schools in Virginia statute does not apply to the $100 million in grant funding being added to the fund, and that only public baccalaureate institutions qualify. In order to avoid confusion and potentially wasting time of institutions that do not qualify, we urge members of the board to wait for an updated, corrected copy of the guidelines before receiving the documents for first review. Aside from the technical corrections needed, we also encourage the board to strengthen evaluation criteria 3 for the planning grant to ask applying institutions how they will fully fund their lab schools after 1 year worth of per pupil grant funding runs out. With no guarantee of continued state support in future years, we must avoid creating scenarios where new lab schools can only sustain for a single year with state support and in turn create significant disruption for students upon their closure. We ask that the board strengthen this criteria language so that applying institutions can clarify how they will financially sustain operations into the future in the absence of state support. Thank you for your attention, and don't hesitate to reach out to the Virginia Education Association if we can answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson? Ms. Binkley?
Good morning. My name is Cheryl Gibbs Binkley. I'm a retired Virginia school teacher, an instructor at the community college, and a university supervisor for student teachers. I'm also a parent and grandparent of graduates of the Virginia public school systems. First, I'd like to welcome the new members to your first meeting. And I'd like to recommend an anchor task for you. The teacher in me can't resist this. as you begin your tenure. Schedule a visit to 2 schools in the district where you live, the most affluent school and the least affluent school, so that you can see the perspective of the communities that your district really serves. While there, observe a class or 2, ask questions, and most importantly, look deeply into the eyes of the individual students and teachers. For the rest of your tenure here, let the memory of those faces guide your decision-making. Those faces are the data points that matter. We can have millions of data points and do, but those students are what matters. You hold 1,250,000 young lives in your hands. No pressure. So on to, that's your teacher's assignment of the day. On to some of the issues that you're dealing with today. I would say move forward with the things that have been well vetted and thought through, but don't make massive decisions and changes until you're sure the results will be positive on things that people say, rush through, we must do this now. Please remember that unpredictable disruption in the life of a child is much more destabilizing and dangerous than for us adults. And finally, specifically regarding the new evaluation system, which is just kicking off, and the accreditation changes that will be involved in that. At the first training for Virginia's current evaluation in 2012, I was there when James Strong, the author's first words to evaluators were, "Teachers are notorious for being Teflon. Nothing sticks to them. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally have something that will stick." He was right. It stuck like napalm. What has followed is a massive exodus from the teaching field, a huge increase in the amount of data collection and digital paperwork for teachers and administrators that now requires vast parts of the instructional year for testing and data collection. Skyrocketing numbers of expensive administrative positions fed to the accountability machine. So welcome to the high stakes world of the Board of Education and K-12 education. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Ms. Shelley, Dawn Shelley and Marion Burke, or Mary Ann Burke, excuse me.
Good morning. My name is Dawn Shelley. I have served on the Spotsylvania County Board, School Board since 2012 and am the longest serving member. I have served as chairman multiple times. I know how a school board is supposed to conduct business. With that said, I'm speaking on my own behalf. An option 4 candidate on your list of superintendent candidates was one of the 2 superintendent finalists in Spotsylvania. For his name to be on your list, he would have had to have a complete application. For his application to be complete, he would have had a recommendation from the school board. I'm here to tell you that never happened. Whatever the Department of Education received from the chairman of Spotsylvania School Board was fraudulent. The application was incomplete. If anyone says something differently, please check the minutes or the videos. Virginia Code 22.1-71 states, school board members shall have no organization or duties except such that will be assigned by the school board as a whole. The school board as a whole did not vote or authorize the chairman to send a recommendation for superintendent licensure for anyone to the Virginia Department of Education. The chairman did not have the authority to send a letter from the board. I had no knowledge of the letter being sent, and the public, the parents, had no knowledge because there was no action taken. Therefore, the candidate's application must be considered incomplete. Virginia Code 2.2-3710 states, no vote of any kind of any public body shall be taken to authorize the transaction of any public business other than a vote taken at a meeting conducted in accordance with the provisions of this chapter. I reiterate, there was no discussion of any recommendations for an option 4 candidate and no vote. If the department tells you the application was complete because they received a letter from the chairman, you should say no. It was a fraudulent letter. You may also want to ask yourself, did the applicant, a former county attorney, know that it was a fraudulent letter? Again, the application must be ruled incomplete. The option 4 application you received from the Spotsylvania candidate was not a complete application because there was no honest recommendation from a school board. Therefore, it must be ruled invalid. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burke? Followed by Narissa Rahman. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Mary Ann Burke, the mother of 3 graduates from Virginia Public Schools, and all 3 have graduated from Virginia Public Colleges and Universities. I'm speaking on behalf of 4 Public Education today. We have 2 issues to address. First, we insist that the Board of Education retain the African American history text currently in the proposed revised 2022 History and Social Studies SOL and curriculum framework. That text was already approved by the Board of Education in 2020, and we already went through the official public comment period for the revised SOL in 2021. The second public comment period currently underway is highly irregular in that it is not part of the official schedule published for this SOL. Instead, we should be in the public hearing phase of the approval process, according to the official website schedule. We understand that the second public comment period is in response to Governor Youngkin's Executive Order 1, where he refers to African American history, incorrectly, as being divisive content and where he prohibits the content from Virginia classrooms. However, we maintain that all evidence-based history is not divisive if it is true. It is essential that Virginia students learn the complete and honest history, including the history of our African American citizens. We hope that the Board of Education returns to the official schedule approved for this SOL and retains the content on African American history. Secondly, for Public Education requests that the Board of Education do whatever it can to ameliorate the impact of a new law on Virginia's public school students. This new law, the result of Bill SB 36, has the potential of criminalizing primary and secondary students. In the 1990s, Virginia had the dubious honor of being the top state for referring students to law enforcement for infractions at school. But since then, Virginia and many other states revised their zero-tolerance school policies. Now, under this new rule, Virginia will revert to a zero-tolerance method of discipline, which is well known to have negative impacts on students and is not effective at influencing student behavior. Decades of research have shown this to be true, and this type of discipline is disproportionately applied to students of color and students with disabilities. Please help us find a way to minimize the impact of this new law on our kids and help to minimize the disproportionate application of this law to Black and disabled students. Thank you.
Thank you. Narissa Rahman, followed by Brianna Diaz. Good morning.
Good morning, Board. My name is Narissa Rahman. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm here on behalf of Equality Virginia, the Commonwealth's leading statewide LGBTQ advocacy organization. I'm here to stand strong in support and in solidarity with trans and non-binary students in public schools throughout the Commonwealth. Many transgender and non-binary youth in Virginia have shared their stories publicly, including here in previous meetings. And their stories, many of which include experiences of harassment, discrimination, and overall mistreatment within their school systems. We know from listening to and living these stories that trans students and their rights are in constant danger across Virginia, and we cannot stay silent as attacks on trans youth continue. The lives of trans and non-binary youth quite literally depend on access to affirming learning spaces. Since most youth under age 18 spend the majority of their time in school, it is imperative that these environments are supportive of their identities and responsive to their needs. Access to a quality education is impossible if we do not first ensure that the safety and humanity of all students is valued and preserved. The Virginia Department of Education's model policies for the treatment of transgender students in Virginia's public schools is a vital tool for educators, administrators, and student support staff in every locality. The model policies as they are currently written, which are evidence-based and community-informed, and respond to a direct request from school staff for clear guidance regarding the treatment of trans students. Without these policies in place, educational professionals lack the guidelines and best practices that they need to make their schools affirming spaces for all youth. We can speak from experience when we say that this causes confusion, inconsistency, and disruption for students. It should not matter what county they live in, what school they attend, or which teacher they have. All students should be able to walk into school knowing they will be protected and respected. Data from the 2019 GLSEN School Climate Virginia Snapshot shows that trans students who attend schools that don't have explicit trans affirming policies in place are more likely to experience academic difficulties, mental health struggles, and low school attendance. This should ring the alarm bell for all of us, as these outcomes can sabotage a young person's growth as they continue into adulthood. And if serving every student effectively and creating strong futures is a priority here in Virginia, then that needs to include trans and non-binary students too. Trans and non-binary students are not going anywhere. Their struggles are not hypothetical. They are real, current, and damaging. Trans students are kids just like all other students are, and they deserve to feel as though their needs are equally as important. We need swift action on this issue to protect the well-being of transgender and non-binary students. I hope we can all work together to create a better educational experience for all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Brianna Diaz, followed by Paul Nichols. Ms. Diaz. Okay, thank you. Paul Nichols, followed by Delegate Davis. Good morning.
Good morning, members of the board. I'm Paul Nichols. I am the superintendent for Mecklenburg County Public Schools. I have asked that you receive a copy of a document that we just celebrated, the opening of a new middle and high school program. That program was built after 40 years, literally, of controversy in our county related to building new facilities that were much needed because of the age and needs of change for the current middle and high schools that we have had. And it was built based on the idea that we would look to work with our students to make sure that when they graduated from high school, they were ready for real jobs that were available in our locality in Southern Virginia, traditionally agriculture, tobacco-focused area, and that we were in a position to make sure by the guidelines of the Go Virginia program that they had significant career exploration in middle school, career introduction in elementary school, and then moving into 6 career academies in our high school directly connected with the local community college and with the Advanced Knowledge Center in South Hill, the Higher Ed Center in South Boston, and IALR's Go Tech program for middle school in Danville that comes out and works with our schools as well. We were thrilled when the opportunity came along from the governors about lab schools, because it gives us the opportunity to have direct connections and a seamless system of movement from our schools to the local community college to complete certifications that they begin and sometimes finish in high school. We've actually had students already who have completed those certifications and gone on to exceedingly high-paying jobs in the local data centers in Mecklenburg County, as well as in HVAC centers, welding, and other areas, because they've earned the certifications. The opportunity for our schools to be connected with lab schools originating from community college is exceedingly important, because we do not have universities in our backyard in Southern Virginia. Longwood does a great job working with us from a distance, but to be able to have that direct connection is very, very important to us. So I am grateful for the lab school opportunities. It's going to mean that we can work on the idea of blended learning for our schools in particularly math, science, connected with the CTE programs. Hopefully it will give us opportunity to recruit more math, science, and particularly CTE teachers, because right now, most of the persons that are in the businesses can make much more money than I have on my scales for teachers. And then it also gives us an opportunity, we hope, that we'll be able to open up more doors for our students to do work-based learning opportunities in the community, because that has led to some tremendous jobs. So I'm here on behalf of most of our schools, asking that you please continue to keep with the community college and continue to support the lab school environment. If you have any questions, please let me know in Mecklenburg County, and I'll be happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Delegate Davis? Nope. All right. Kume Goranson?
Good morning. My name is Kumi Goranson, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of Code RVA Regional High School. Code RVA is a computer science-focused magnet high school located in Richmond that serves 345 students from 15 school division partners: Amelia, Charles City, Chesterfield, Colonial Heights, Cumberland, Dinwiddie, Hanover, Henrico, Hopewell, New Kent, Petersburg, Powhatan, Prince George, Richmond, and Sussex. These school divisions fully fund Code RVA because we do not receive state funding. Our school would benefit tremendously from the opportunity to access proposed lab school funding. As we enter into our 6 years of school, Code RVA has a proven track record of success. We use a unique barrier-free lottery system to admit students. There are no minimum GPAs, test scores, or other academic requirements. Our lottery creates a student body that represents our partnering school divisions, and we consistently achieve SOL scores at or above state averages. This includes high levels of achievement for the 24% of our students who are identified as receiving special education services. Code RVA is proof of concept that a regional computer science-focused school works for students, and we would be proud to serve as the model for a lab school network for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Some of Code RVA students currently travel an hour or more each way to attend school. And if similar computer science-focused lab schools existed in all regions of the Commonwealth, many of our students would be able to attend school closer to where they live while still accessing a curriculum they love. Code RVA currently has partnerships with higher education institutions such as Virginia Commonwealth University, Virginia State, Virginia Union, and J. Sargent Reynolds Community College, which hosts our associate degree program. In formalizing lab school partnerships, our school and others would have access to innovative research led by university partners on our campuses. The mission of Code RVA Regional High School is to prepare a diverse population of students for college and careers in computer science through personalized, integrated, and applied learning. We believe all students deserve access to a high-quality, computer science-focused education that will prepare them for the thousands of vacant CS and IT-related jobs in Virginia. Since its inception in 2017, Code RVA teachers have honed our instructional model, developed in-house internships for all our 11th and 12th grade students, and authentically incorporated the durable skills that every student needs for success in the future. We are now ready to share our model across the state and look forward to collaborating with our partner, Code VA, and Virginia's educators as part of a network of computer science-focused lab schools.
Thank you. Chris Dovey, followed by Sarah Ward.
Trying to make those easy for you so that you can. Should I start my comment? Okay.
Superintendent Balo, Chairman Gacker, members of the Board of Education, thank you for this time to speak in support of lab schools in Virginia. I'm Chris Dovey, Executive Director of Code VA, a public-private partnership that provides free professional learning to teachers in support of Virginia's computer science SOLs. I'm also an appointed member of the Virginia STEM Advisory Board, and I feel compelled now to say that I'm also a proud parent of 2 graduates of Virginia Public Schools who I'm now paying a lot of money for in Virginia colleges. Governor Youngkin launched his lab school initiative in April at Google's Northern Virginia headquarters, spotlighting as central to the announcement Code VA's proposal to establish a network of computer science lab schools across the state using the successful Code RVA high school model. The proposal supports K-12 computer science and STEM integration in tandem with Code VA's established computer science teacher professional development hub network that has trained thousands of teachers in Virginia. I'm here to offer that lab schools have the potential to be one of the most unifying, sustainable, and impactful ideas in public education. Industry, school division leadership, and higher education partners have heartily pledged support for a shared vision of a regional computer science lab school network paired with what can serve as the foundation of the previous administration's plan for a state STEM hub network serving educators and kids, increasing efficiency and student impact statewide. Once paired, properly supported, and encouraged by this Commonwealth's unified government leaders, the lab school network and STEM hub network are inseparable and entirely replicable. In this hub network of computer science schools, cutting-edge higher education research will meet with practical classroom practice. This plan also incorporates an established model for dissemination to all schools, Code VA, and the education pre-preparation programs is vital. With support and collaboration of industry partners, these programs will align with workforce needs specific to each region. This plan will provide a world-class model for innovation. If you don't believe me, believe our partners who represent school divisions, higher education institutions, and industry leaders committed to Code VA and Governor Youngkin's vision. They represent collaborations ready to launch in all 8 superintendent regions of the Commonwealth. Our industry partners include Amazon, which already has invested nearly $4 million in Code VA and Virginia K-12 computer science, and ask that I tell you that Code VA is their preferred education partner in Virginia. Microsoft, which has supported Code VA since day one. Newport News Shipbuilding, which has asked that I confirm their pledged support for this idea. Google, which has committed funding to Code VA's plan and reiterated its desire to see this idea through. And Lego, new to the Commonwealth and ready to help us think bold. ODU, VCU, VSU, UMC, GMU, UVA-Wise, Longwood, and our regional higher education partners have all expressed their support, recognizing this initiative as a practical and innovative way of igniting their pre-service teacher preparation programs to incorporate the mandatory computer science literacy standards, so vital to Virginia's future prosperity and competitiveness. All of these partners are lined up to support our school division partners who've also pledged to lead efforts in the superintendent regions to marshal neighboring school divisions to embrace this effort as a regional collaborative that will benefit all Virginia learners. I thank this board for your time and your support, and enjoy the leave behind.
Thank you. Sarah Ward, followed by Emily Klein.
Good morning, President Gecker and members of the Board of Education. My name is Sarah Johnson Ward, and I live in Chesterfield, Virginia. I would like to thank the Department of Education for the very thorough job they have done in developing the history and social studies standards of learning. It's clear from the presentation that many experts have been consulted and public comments have been considered. It's impossible to ignore the amount of work that has gone into the process up to this point. I encourage the board to move forward with the process and the revisions as soon as possible. It is unfair to students to delay this process for a redundant one, and it seems inconsiderate of taxpayers to increase the cost by spending time on endless revisions. Specifically, I call attention to the superintendent's recommendation as outlined in the memo from Ms. Brown, the History and Social Studies Coordinator. It says, the superintendent of public instruction does not recommend the board receive for review the history and social studies standards of learning. The state superintendent recommends the draft standards undergo further development and input from Virginians and national experts prior to acceptance of first review by the board. Our shared goal is to have best-in-class history and social studies standards. It would seem that the superintendent is not aware of the process that has already taken place, yet describes that process perfectly in this recommendation. To be clear, nearly 40 historians and college professors, 50 teachers, 10 students, 34 museum professionals, 25 parents, 5 business leaders, and 34 history and social studies teachers made up the committees who worked through revisions. Additionally, BDOE fielded over 5,000 public comments. This begs the question, who is the superintendent attempting to please? Will the same recommendation apply to all SOL revisions? Why the delay for this particular standard? The timeline and process for revising the standards has been in place since George Allen was governor in 1995. Beginning this process in early 2021, the Department of Education has clearly done due diligence to ensure revisions are made in a comprehensive and timely manner. I see no reason for delay based on the information provided. Please keep the process moving forward and put the standards in place. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment.
Thank you. Emily Klein, followed by Kathy Halverson.
Good morning. I'm here today to discuss equal and inclusive access to education for our most vulnerable population of students, students with disabilities. Virginia has refused to respond to my reasonable request for information. Instead, you have chosen to divert, delay, and deny my rights. I believe you are aware of the nefarious acts, and rather than responding, you have avoided the questions altogether. So with regards to compensatory services and due process hearings, the Virginia Department of Education decided to change the definition of educational opportunities to students with disabilities in June 2020 to avoid having to provide services and comply with IDEA. This was not the intent of the US DOE when the federal government issued taxpayer dollars to take care of the most vulnerable population of students. You chose to do nothing and have insisted my issues must be brought to due process. So let's talk due process. The department continues to refuse to investigate the evidence I have provided of the unlawful, unethical, and discriminatory due process system. Instead, you continue to force families through grueling, expensive, corrupt proceedings. I have provided you with documentation of hearing officers lying, Chesterfield County Council as unethical and unlawful behavior, Chesterfield employees committing perjury, falsifying documents, inflating grades, and principals committing fraud. It is atrocious. As a family, I must spend my entire life savings on an attorney to fight for my child's education. The LEEA can hire Sands Anderson to do their dirty work at taxpayers' expense and my expense, over $250,000. My blue-collar family had no chance at even having our story heard under these conditions. Chesterfield can spend as much money as it takes to block parents from a fair hearing. I have repeatedly asked for who is in charge of the hearing officers, and according to the Virginia Code, it is the VDOE, despite Sam Hollins asserting otherwise. You work for the people. I have a very specific and very egregious case that has robbed my family not only of money and time, but my child of an education and a childhood. This corrupt process has ripped my family at the seams and destroyed any trust we have in the system. I urge you to take control of the process and protect families of students with disabilities. I urge you to provide a fair and equal opportunity for education for your students with disabilities. I urge you to rethink how you left children behind by asserting that they did not deserve the same opportunities as their non-disabled peers. And I urge you to take pride in your work rather than covering up your failures. The fact that you allow Sarah Smith Freeman to continue as a hearing officer in the state of Virginia is egregious. You are spending taxpayers' money on someone who has repeatedly blamed children for their disability, practices psychology without a license, and discriminates against Spanish-speaking and African-American and disabled populations in the state of Virginia. It's unacceptable, unprofessional, and an embarrassment of the entire establishment. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Halverson, followed by Faith Jarvis.
Ms. Halverson was not able to make it and couldn't participate virtually because you don't have that option.
Okay. Ms. Jarvis?
Just want to make sure everybody can hear me before I start. Okay. Hello, my name is Faith Jarvis. I'm a mother, aunt, and business owner, and I donate a lot of my time and resources to Spotsylvania County Public Schools. I want the people that I voted for to support what's right for the students of Virginia, as that is your sole purpose here on this board. Governor Youngkin assured me that Virginia's parents can decide what's best for their children. And what is best for our children in Spotsylvania County Public Schools was made clear to GR Recruiting. We wanted a superintendent who was a trusted leader with an educational background. Instead, when I saw Mark Taylor's name on the list to vote on granting him a superintendent's license, I immediately was concerned because more policies and laws must have been violated. While he meets the least requirement available to be a superintendent, which is option 4, the process for his recommendation violates the law. The illegal actions of the current Spotsylvania County School Board has resulted in them currently being sued for violating policies and FOIA laws. They violated Virginia Code 2.2-3710, which is why I'm here before you today. Mr. Taylor, being an attorney, is fully aware of the law, as he has a knowledge of the law, even with his lack of understanding in education. Mark Taylor has 0 experience in education, opting to homeschool his own children years ago. We have no deputy superintendent, director of student resources, finance director, or director of human resources in Spotsylvania County. It's a sinking ship at the helm of our chairman and our vice chairman, who allow their friends to verbally assault and bully mothers and children at board meetings with no consequences. They violate their own policies at every single meeting. They even swear from the dais and have since the very moment they took office by terminating without cause our previous superintendent, Dr. Baker. So it's a little fishy that Mr. Twig, our chairman, is now wanting his friend appointed as superintendent. How can this board approve or accept a recommendation for a superintendent that was sent without public knowledge, without a public vote, and that violates the law? More importantly, there have been 5 meetings and one that was rescheduled from yesterday to Friday. That's ample time to hold a vote without identifying the confidentiality of a candidate. As Republicans, we believe in transparency. Mr. Taylor is not qualified to address the needs of our students, nor does he fit the job description criteria, and being a former county attorney is a direct conflict of interest for several parents in our county. Our chairman nor vice chair have the power to act in this capacity alone to recommend a candidate for licensure. You must follow the law and give parents the choice that you assured us that we would have. I was once told by an amazing administrator whom I respect to always ask before making any decision, is this what's best for the students? Mark Taylor, as superintendent, is not what's best for our students, and his recommendation violates the law. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That covers the list of people who have signed up. Ms. Lucas, although I'm told that everybody was heard by everybody on the Zoom, we're going to give you another opportunity if you'd like.
Delegate Davis, sorry.
Yes, sir.
A little late.
I
should be on the list, I think.
You are on the list, and we're happy to have you here.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everything y'all do. I think there's some exciting things coming forward. I just wanted to be in front of you today to talk briefly about the lab schools. This has been a very exciting endeavor that Virginia has moved forward on. We've always said we need to innovate in our school systems, K-12, to make sure our students are prepared for that 21st century economy, for our 21st century jobs. And it's been exciting to see the number of entities of higher education that have already stepped forward to partner with these high schools and middle schools to help create those opportunities. It's something that I think will create high-paying jobs, in many cases fresh out of high school, for these students that allow them to compete on a global level with the skill set, not a book knowledge, but a skill knowledge on equipment and processes for industries that are thriving today. And so as you continue looking forward, I would one, thank you for all you're doing for lab schools. And secondly, ask you to continue pushing it forward. I know that there may be a single person's opinion out there on language disparities, and I know that the chair of appropriations already opined that everything's fine. But what I can tell you is all the language in the budget on lab schools passed in a bipartisan manner. And all of us knew what the intent of that language was. It was to provide the ability for four-year public and private institutions and community colleges as well to be able to work with our high schools to provide innovative opportunities for those students. And I would say that if we do anything that delays that process, it doesn't hurt any of us. It doesn't hurt any of them. What it does hurt is the children. We have children going through high school today that are geared up and able to take advantage of these processes in these lab schools as long as we don't delay this any further. If for any reason a technical amendment needs to be made to further clarify what we already passed and intended, the General Assembly is happy to do so. But the most important thing is to continue moving this forward as fast as possible, to not lose any of the momentum, excitement, and most importantly, not let any more kids fall through the cracks. And thank you again for all your time.
Okay, thank you. Again, Ms. Lucas, we were going to give you 3 more minutes just out of abundance of caution.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I did see on the screen, live stream, our advocate showed that I was blocked out during my first comment. So I appreciate you accommodating this. Once again, my name is Candace Lucas. I'm a licensed educator and administrator by the Virginia Department of Education, authorized to teach children with disabilities in the three major categories. I provided you with 3 resources to address the issues that are going on in Virginia, so you will be educated to do so. The book by Dr. Warren, which is called Willful Defiance, which identifies the violations, civil rights violations that are systemic throughout Virginia, in Henrico, Chesterfield, and several other jurisdictions. He outlines this information and mentions the families involved. I provided you a copy of what we call the Purple Book, the regulatory guide for special education that is outdated. It's over 2 decades old. It is not complied with, it has not been reviewed, and it is not enforceable at this point. I also provided you with the critical decision-making guide that the VDOE provided in 2018 that is not being utilized. This must be provided to every parent who has a child with a disability via their IEP meetings. When we go ahead and we have meetings and we ask these questions that are outlined in this book, the school divisions refuse to answer. The VDOE refuses to answer. We're put out of meetings. We're told that we're being disruptive to the process when we're simply asserting our rights. I shared before that Governor Youngkin ran on the premise that parents matter. The Board of Education and the VDOE did not get that memo. Parents don't matter to you guys. I know you guys are new, but the culture is so toxic in the VDOE that you need to completely drain the swamp. You need to drain the swamp. And once again, I'll also state that you need to work on ensuring that SB 1288 via the superintendent's March 4th, 2022 memorandum, which requires that anyone that participates in a special education meeting has to go through the training outlined under SB 1288. As of today, none of the individuals that we have in Virginia, as far as Henrico, Chesterfield, all of them, Fairfax, they're stating they don't have to comply with SB 1288, and they're refusing to take the training. So we have people we have people practicing special education without certification. That's dangerous. That's like a nurse engaging in brain surgery. Can't do that. You can't do that. So I'm hoping that this new board will take the necessary steps to clean up the mess and the crisis that is special education, and that you will demand that special education be on the agenda every single month. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, that covers a list of people who signed up for public comment. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board this morning? Yes, ma'am. And then in the back, I thought I saw somebody. Yeah, come on up. ma'am.
Hi, board, and thank you. My name is Jamie Ashton. I don't like public speaking, so forgive me. Thank you all for your dedication to our children's education. Combined, my kids have over 25 years spent in the Spotsy County's public school system. I'm here to speak about the option 4 situation. I echo what everybody else said about the process was not properly done, so there shouldn't even be a vote on him. And in addition, Mr. Taylor is not qualified based on the consulting firm that was hired, did a survey for the residents. They wanted somebody with a history in education, somebody that can work together as a board and bring people together. In 2012, the Freelance Star did an article on Mr. Taylor when he was appointed to the county director, saying that his children were homeschooled. Being that his children never attended public school, he's never sat in on a PTA meeting, a parent-teacher conference meeting. He's never had his kids have to stress about SOLs. He doesn't even have that experience, much less the educational teaching experience part of it. The same newspaper article in 2012 stated that he had a sign in his office that says it is what it is, and that he elaborated on that sign saying that that's the phrase he uses when a problem can't be resolved. That's not what we need. We don't have an assistant superintendent, a director of finance, a director of special needs. We are running on bare bones. We need somebody who can bring what is left of our school system back together and pull it together. He also stated in the same article that he went against the school board Spotsylvania School Board when he was working for a different county on an issue. And in the same article, it goes on to say that he didn't have the Board of Supervisors support when he was appointed to that position. That is critical because 2 of those board members are still Board of Supervisors. He has got to be able to have their trust and respect and a working relationship with them in order to get funding for our schools, which we critically need. And I know you appreciate how important not just state funding, but local level funding and support is. We need somebody that can unite the county. And as you can see, we don't have that right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And yes, sir.
My name is Anthony LaFaro, and I've resided in Spotsylvania County for the last 13 years. And I'm here to echo some of the comments already made. And rather than repeat a lot of the same information, I'll just put it this way. At the heart of this, in terms of whether or not to approve Mr. Taylor having a certification, is not just does he meet the qualifications, not just was the proper legal process followed, neither happened. The answer to those are obviously no, which in itself should disqualify his application. But nonetheless, it's, does this board support transparency in government? Does this board support parents' rights? Parents' rights, students' rights, and the rights of all Spotsylvania constituents have been violated by this process. And it's not the first time, as has been previously mentioned, and there's probably further legal action pending. So do you support public or education of any kind being followed in a manner that's transparent, done by qualified individuals with the right intention to better education, that's supportive of parents and students? Or do you support cronyism? Do you support a board chair putting forth his unqualified friend for a position not using the appropriate or legal process that is advertised to pay well over $100,000 more than that man's current position, and significantly higher than the previous superintendent who was fired without cause after improving the system in all state measures throughout his term? Do you support cronyism, or do you support parents and students working together with teachers and other staff for improving education in Virginia? Because that is what is at the heart of this. It's a simple assessment. At the very least, table this until you have further information. But approving him to go forth as a candidate shows a complete disregard for the law, a complete disregard for parents and students, a complete disregard of qualifications for people in education, and support of cronyism that should not be accepted by anybody in a government body. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to address the board this morning? Yes, sir.
Good evening, folks. Just a few moments of your time. My name's Kirk Twigg. I'm chairman of the Spotsylvania County School Board. And just to clarify a few things, you've just heard from 5 of the 12 naysayers that come to all of our meetings and talk like that. That aside, the fact of the matter is we are still in private session with the matter because our attorney advised us that we can't go public with anything until an individual is on the list. So all we're doing is putting this individual on the list. You have a letter that has the word confidential associated with it on behalf of the board. I was simply administrating when I sent that letter, but there was a choice made in that private session. So that erases the illegality issue / concern. So I say all of that to say that we're still in private session. We have a majority thumbs up vote, which we do in private session, to select a candidate, which we have not chosen. There's an individual that is aiming to be put on the list today who's fully qualified under option 4 within your guise, your protocols, your procedures, your SOPs, that sets all of that in motion, but it predicates the very issue of you putting this person on the list. If that it remains our choice, Then we go back to making a vote in private session. Then we make that vote public. So that's the essence of all that concern. This individual is very qualified in a lot of things. Time prohibits listing that here. And just keep in mind a couple other little things that we had a national search firm that set the pace for all of this. Here we are seeking to get a name approved from our list so that we can follow through. So let's avoid any politics, any individual opinions. Look collectively at the problem. Look at your procedures and protocols, and let's make an effective decision today on not only this individual, but 30 or 40 others, so that we can get back to business like the last speaker spoke with regard to, in that, or two speakers ago. We cannot operate without a superintendent. That's the beginning of all of the beginnings for revising up and upgrading the quality of education in the Spotsylvania school system. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, since I was directly referenced, can I say something?
No, ma'am, but thank you.
Medically, I've not spoken at a public meeting in over a year. So I just want to clarify that. I'm not one of what you stated at the beginning.
Okay, I appreciate that. Anybody else want to speak before the board? I don't see anybody, so we are going to close the public comment period. Going to make a couple changes to the agenda. I've had a request to accommodate scheduling to swap items H and I, which we're happy to do. We're going to end up pulling item A off the consent agenda. We will go into closed session to solicit advice of counsel. We'll do that shortly, but first, can we go ahead and have a motion, or is there any discussion on what was item B on the consent agenda, final review of financial report on the literary fund and updates to the first priority waiting list? Thank you, Mr. Hansen. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Creasy. All those in favor, or is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Thank you. Any opposed? I don't hear any, so item B carries. Emily. No, Emily. We have the motion to go into closed session.
President, I move. First day, sorry. Mr. President, I move that pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A8, the Virginia Board of Education convene a closed meeting for the purposes of discussion and consideration, consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice as detailed below, relevant to the final review to certify the list of qualified persons for the Office of Division Superintendent of Schools, and the Deb Love and Coke Sargent, legal counsel of the Virginia Board of Education, as well as staff members Jillian Ballo, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and Maggie Clemens, the Director of the Office of Teacher Licensure and School Leadership, whose presence will aid in the board's consideration of this matter, also participate in the closed meeting.
Thank you. We have motions. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dr. Siebert. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the board's going to move into executive session, which means I guess we got to clear the room except for those people who are authorized by the motion.